We're going to get this stream started. Welcome back. Welcome to our TSEX general meeting. What week is this? We're at like 12, right? It has to be. Somewhere around there. I'm kind of getting sleepy. I'm going to be real with you. All right. Announcements. Join the Discord. Yeah, I honestly, if you guys aren't in there, that's crazy. It's too, just, I don't know, man. Just, you need to join that. I wish I could pan the camera over to show Anthony doing this, but okay. Please sign in. Is signing up? Sign in is up today. One time. Or swag. Sign in. All right. Also, check the calendar. If you don't check the calendar, then you don't know that we're having RIT CTF today and this weekend and all the other events. So you guys should join that. Woo! Okay, we're not clapping yet. Wait. Also, join the mailing list. That way you can see Sarah's sweet newsletters. Excuse me. All right. As I've mentioned 15 million times in the past 2 minutes, RIT CTF is happening. Yeah, if you're participating in it, please sign up. We have a limit on the team size. It's 5 players. Is Chase K in here? 5 players, Chase K. And yeah, sign that QR code if you guys want to participate. There's some pretty swagger challenges in there. Perhaps a signals challenge coming soon from me. Braden has a pretty swagger challenge in there now that you can't use Scratch to solve. You could, apparently, allegedly. Yeah, resume review. We have this new thing now where you can submit your resume and it will get reviewed and you'll get feedback. So you don't have to fiddle around with the Discord channel, but we have a new thing. It's a new platform. I personally haven't tested it out, but I believe it's pretty swagger. Right, Malik? It is, Malik. Joe, you want to talk about it a little bit, buddy? Oh, yeah, come up here, Joe. Everybody clap for Joe.
Oh, yeah, well out here. Yeah, so we like Discord, but know what's better than Discord? A full-on website. One of the things that I saw was an issue with the whole Discord channel is things get lost. You don't see everyone's resumes, and it can sometimes just get cluttered. Now, you can upload your resume here. Everything's in one place. You can get feedback. You can have kind of threads on things to improve. And also, your resume is just in one place, so if we ever need to get people's resumes in the future, we're going to check here. When you upload it, you'll see a cool message in the Discord channel. So y'all should definitely go on there, upload your resume, and get some good feedback for it. Live demo. I can do a live demo. So you gotta use your RIT email, or tell you no. So yeah, you can see these really cool 4 people who uploaded their resume so far. You look at Malik's amazing resume.
Thank you, Chase K.
Such a good resume.
I like the orange. Thank you, Chase K. But yeah, this is actually really nice. Oh.
Why haven't you uploaded your resume yet, Kenny?
Because it doesn't need to be on there.
I think it does.
I don't think it does. I don't think it do. Okay, anyway, we're going to continue. Okay, wait. Okay, now. Thank you for the demo, Joe. Now we meet the sponsors. Everybody clap. Okay. Keep going. Okay, stop. Follow our social media. There was a very nice Instagram post, I believe, yesterday with our nice large group photo from ISTS 23. It was pretty nice. Not sure about Twitter, but I know it was on Instagram, so follow those. Okay, picture this. Today, we have Digital Forensics and Instant Response with Kat and Malik featuring Brad. Oh, yeah. Everybody give them a round of applause. A lot of work went into this presentation. Okay, mosey on up here, you two. Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone. Let's just get rolling into this. So today, Malik and I are going to be presenting on digital forensics and incident response. As you can see, my name is not Kat. I'm Brad, but unfortunately, Kat cannot present today. But I'm here filling in for her. But she did contribute to all of these slides. I just read through them, so any credit doesn't go to me.
All right, so first of all, about me, my name is Abdul Malik, but I just go by Malik. I'm from Saudi Arabia. Senior BSMS, this is my last semester, hopefully. Interest home labbing, DevSecOps, digital forensics, purple teaming, and black teaming as well. You have my credentials down there. If you want to reach out to me, please don't hesitate to. I'm more than willing to have a chat with you.
This is Kat's intro slide. I think you guys know and love her. But her contact information is down there if you want to reach out. Oh, the Discord has actually changed. It's not that anymore, but I promise she's in the RITSec Discord. You can find her. Oh, my slides didn't update. Okay, well, I replaced who am I with my actual name to fit the theme, but that's okay. I'm originally from Virginia. If you don't know me, I'm from Central Virginia. We love Dumpling. Dumpling was also right here as featured in Kato's channel. She's really cute, but she's also a menace. And it's my third year here, fourth year BSMS student. Going to be transitioning to my graduate year next year. I used to say Linux lover, Mac user on this slide, but I've officially transitioned out of that. No longer use a Mac. We're officially 100% Linux here. I know I don't run Arch. I run Fedora. I want it to work. I don't want to have to reinstall my OS during class every other week. But yeah, I'm a code monkey. You can get me hooked on any programming project whatsoever. I love the program. But I also love pen testing, as well as do a little hardware hacking. Mr. Kenny, if you want to learn more about hardware hacking, Kenny did a presentation on hardware hacking a little while ago. It was real good. But yeah, I've also done co-ops with the Global Cybersecurity Institute. That should actually say ESL GCI, sorry. As well as security risk advisors. So yeah, we're going to get started. I'm going to hand it off to Malik for a little introduction to what is incident response.
All right, thank you, Brad. And before I start into what is incident response, how to build an incident response plan, we need to first understand what is an incident. Does anyone want to give me a definition of what is an incident? Just to make it more interactive. Okay, go, Kenny. That's so true. Okay, yeah, for the stream, Kenny said when the Minecraft server on the stack goes down, that is an incident, and that's so true. An incident can happen as a disruption in the service that you have, or like an availability of a service you do have, or a cyber attack. It can be various type of incidents. It's not all cybersecurity incident. It can be like disaster incidents, or you can be like having natural disasters, and you can also have security disaster, or you can just have service disruption disasters. So all of those disasters I just mentioned, they can be classified as incidents. And this is to put that in formal definition, an incident occurs when your computer security rules or standard security procedure are violated or threatened to be violated. That's in the realm of cybersecurity specifically, or when we talk about security incidents. But when we talk about general incidents, it can have different meanings. For example, we have distributed denial of service, which is like DDoS attacks. We have unauthorized access. We have privilege escalations, and phishing, and the list goes on. So now I have an incident. I got into under attack. I have the attacker just breach my credentials or breach my data. How can I respond to that? I must have a plan. I must have something that I can actually work according to, because during the time of the panic, you will actually lose it. You will not be able to focus, or you will not be able to think properly. So that's why we always recommend to prepare those plans beforehand. So just to put that in a formal definition, a cybersecurity incident response plan should be starting point for the incident handling process. So we have an incident to go back again to the example, Minecraft server goes down. So if Minecraft server goes down, how I want to react to that, what I want to do for that. Probably we're going to say why it did go down, try to bring it back up, then you can do your actual process of investigation, why it did go down in the first place, but you just want to ensure the highest availability you can provide to your customers or to your members. So what goes inside that incident response plan? Identify your team, define the scope, assess the risk, and develop responses, procedures, and verification and improvements. Identify your team, so who are responsible for this, who are the service owner of this service, who are required to be on the contact point for that specific service or that specific infrastructure. Define the scope. So if this service goes down or if it got compromised, what's the scope? What's the impact that's gonna happen? And after that, you have to assess the risk and see if it got compromised or got breached, what are the risks related to my customers or related to myself or to my company or related to anyone that could be affected as well. Develop a response plans, how you want to respond to that, and what is the procedure that you want to do. Make it detailed and thorough as much as possible, and verification and improvements on that side. So now we just talked about how to build an incident response plan, or just like the tiny details of incident response plans. But what is incident response in general or itself? The steps is to prepare, detect, and contain and recover from data breaches. And it is effectively to manage incident that its damage is limited. So the damage is limited. It's not like gonna go across your environment. And want to recover the time and cost and collateral damage to kept at minimum. So whenever you have an incident, you want to have the plan so you can actually minimize the damage that can be done, and you can also prepare for detection, and you can actually contain and recover and get back to normal as soon as possible, and to avoid any service disruptions. So now we'll talk about incident response life cycle. There are main 4 steps in incident response life cycle, which is the preparation, the detection, and contaminating, and eradication and recovery. And we have the post-incident activity. As we can see here in this diagram, all of those are like connected together. From preparation, you can go to detection and response or analysis. Then you can go to containment, and then you can go back to detection because you just found something new. And from containment detection to back to containment, and then to analysis or post activity. Then you just go back to prepare for the future incidents. We hope that they don't happen, but if they do happen, we just wanted to make it minimize. All right, so incident response preparation involves developing policies, procedure, and protocols that will guide you through the incident response team's actions during the incident. So those policy and procedure will tell the team what to not to do during an incident, and it will help them to identify the incident response team rules and like know what we need to do, what is expected from us, what is not expected from us, what is lies between our scope or within our scope, what is outside of our scope as an incident response plan. And after that, we got to establish the communication protocol. Time of incident is like time of panic, time of disaster. So everyone is going to be panicking. So you must have defined the communication protocols, how you want to communicate, how the chain command goes, and making sure that you're being verbose as much as you can during the incidents, although it's going to be like challenging during those times specifically because it's disaster time again. So defining those communication platforms or communication protocols is really essential. And as we will see in every step, communication is a key. Identify necessary resources. For example, again, any service that you have on the cloud or on your server or whatever you have it, identify what resources you need to protect that service, what logging tools you want, what personal training that you want to have, what is like any like personal measures that you want to take. Like I should not use default password. I should not enable root SSH login to my box. I should not enable default root password. I should use SSH over Telnet. All of those like personal security hygiene or practices that you should follow to make sure that security of your box is ensured to some like level. Then conduct regular testing and training. As we all know, pen testing in the field is highly important and is like highly used as well. So that actually can be used to just get a pen testers, test my environment, where are my vulnerabilities, where are my weaknesses, how can I improve them, how can I just go over them and actually get myself secured. That is for the preparation slides or for the preparation step in the incident response. Now we'll jump to detection and analysis. So let's say you have an incident and your preparation step did not work as expected, and you failed at that. You did not fail. You got hacked, let's say, or you got compromised. And now, how can I detect that, or how can I analyze the attack that happened for me? Monitor for usual activity. So monitoring or logging is actually a key component in like incident response. You must have logs, all sorts of logs centralized, and you can correlate those logs and just make sure that they are what should be like what you should be seeing, instead of like attacking logs or like malicious logs or brute forcing attacks. So monitor for usual logs and define what is usual and what is unusual. This is a key step. If you look into the logs for the first time and you don't know what the usual looks like, you will not be able to define or understand if there is something unusual. So understanding the baseline is really a key. Again, and review the logs for potential IUCs or indicator of compromise. And indicator of compromise, they are shared across the internet. Many security researchers, security community just share IUCs, which can be found in type of like URLs, IP addresses, file hashes. The list goes on, like email signatures, stuff like that. So if you have an IUC, like I have an IP address, and someone told me, Brad gave me an IP address. I said, well, okay, Malik, this is a malicious IP address. I can take that IP address and search through my logs to see, do I have any activity from that IP? If I do, that's a potential to be, I have been compromised. Or I can just plug that IP to make sure that I have my preparation step. So we can see each step in this process is proactive. It's not being passive. You will have to act to get results. Conduct forensic analysis, which Brad will cover in a bit, to determine the nature of the scope of the incident and classify the incident based on severity, and that depends on the service itself. Is the service like really important? Is it critical service? Is it not? And determine all of those can vary from like company to company or from service to service. And again, back to communication, notify appropriate incident response team members. Communication is the key. You have to be open and verbose as much as you can, even though it's in disaster time and it's like challenging times. Now we'll move to containment. After you have detected the incident, you have to identify and isolate affected system on the network segment. So I figured out, okay, some hosts in my network got breached, and I have 3 other hosts. I should isolate the first host from the other 2, so the attacker cannot just pivot from one box to other box and compromise the whole network. So that will limit the spread of the incident, and it will prevent additional damage or data loss. Preserve the incident for analysis on investigation. Whatever like evidence you collect during the investigation process, you should keep those for like future lesson learned, or just for your records, or for some government agencies. Notify appropriate incident response team. Notify appropriate incident response team members. That goes again. You have to notify everyone throughout the process. So after we contain the incident, and we now have time to eradicate. What does eradicate mean? Is actually kick them out, kick the attacker out of your system, and remove malicious code or other indicator of compromise. We isolated the box. Now I need to remove any binaries they installed, any executable they installed, any like bacon they did, or like whatever you want to do, or how you want to call it. Apply patches or update for vulnerable system. So if the system was vulnerable to a specific exploit that is baked in the OS itself, you can just do a system update, so we make sure that you are up to date with the security features. Reconfigure the system and the network to prevent reinfection. Just disable the first attack vector of that attack to ensure the security of your system again. And again, notify appropriate incident response team members. Recovery is restore a system and data from backups, whether it's like from backups or from default settings you had, or anything that you had before. it just restore everything to back what it was in the first initial state, and verify the data integrity has been maintained. Data integrity means that the data has not been tampered, has not been played with, and it is where you left off from the last times. Test and restored system and application for functionality. Make sure they are working as expected, and reconnect system to the network or in the production environment. So again, back to the host that we isolate from the network. We're going to connect those three together now, and we have our own topology back to normal. And again, notify appropriate incident response team. So after all of that steps, you somehow have covered the incidents, you have controlled the damage, and now what shall I do? What's next? Am I done? You're not done yet. You have to do one more essential steps to prevent that from happening from the future, and you can use that as a lesson learned and what you can improve in the future. Work on your incident response plan, what failed, what did not fail, how did your team react to it, how is the communication goes, did they follow the communication protocols, they did not, did someone panic, did someone did X, Y, and Z stuff, how can I improve the workflow even better in the future, so when an incident happens in the future, I know I can and my team can respond to that appropriately. And that's it for incident response. Now we'll move to digital forensics with Brad.
All right, thank you. And actually, I think something we forgot to add into the slides in the first half. If you do get involved in incident response, it's not like you're going to have to come up with that all on your own, I promise. Especially if you're an intern or if you're a beginner employee. There's going to be these things called playbooks. And playbooks are developed to take you through that process, and someone's already written that procedure. Now, if you are maybe a senior level incident response engineer, well, you may be the one writing those playbooks, and you may have to figure out all those steps. But it's really important in this process that you write down everything you're doing. I know Malik and I have attacked problems with the RITSec infrastructure. We have issues, but we need to write down, document all the steps we're taking. That way, when this happens again, we have a playbook to run through. Root cause analysis, fixing the true issue may take a really long time. But in the meantime, if it happens again, you need to know, hey, how do we actually fix this in the moment if this were to arise? So things called playbooks, they're super important in incident response, as well as moving into digital forensics. So first off, digital forensics and IR are used in the same thing. Usually you hear something called DFIR, digital forensics and incident response, but they are slightly different. So digital forensics, it's a subfield of forensic science. So this is things like, when you see CSI at a crime scene. Technically, digital forensics is like a subset of that kind of forensics. It's concerned with identification, acquisition, analysis, and reporting on basically any data that's stored electronically. So this can be in your phone, in your computer, in your fridge nowadays. All of this is what we call evidence. I'm sure if you guys watch Law and Order, you're super familiar with this kind of terminology. I love SVU. I encourage everyone to watch it. But we have to be super careful when dealing with this kind of data, especially if you say get a laptop of someone who allegedly murdered someone. We don't want that information getting leaked out to the public. So we have to be super careful about the process that we follow to make sure we're having not only data privacy, but also data integrity. This is digital data. It's really easy to go in and flip a few bits and make something mean something completely different. Change an A to a B here, or you could be completely corrupting a file system. So you have to be super careful that you're maintaining data integrity and data privacy in this process. But like I said, this is not the same as in its incident response. Incident response is focused more on the live systems, like the operations, as Malik described. In the moment, you've been hacked, an incident occurred, your server went down. This is respond to it in the moment. During that, Malik mentioned, hey, you should probably be collecting images for forensic analysis. This means taking your memory, your RAM, your hard drive, everything, and taking a copy of it. That way we can spend a month or two looking at it and not have to wait to bring back our systems online. So the IR process is focused on that containment and stopping everything in the moment, but a part of that is taking a copy to move to the digital forensics process, where we take our time, we analyze. This is really like where that root cause analysis that I mentioned earlier, figuring out exactly what caused the issue, where it came from, and then building into the preparation phase of IR is really what the reports coming out of digital forensics helps build up. And I will mention that oftentimes in digital forensics, like this can go into actual court. So like another big part of this is how do you become an expert witness? And we'll go into that a little later. But what we look at are the things called artifacts. These are ways to tell something was executed, something was downloaded, something happened on a system. You can collect these from what we call a dead system. This is not like a live running computer. This is what I mentioned before. When you go like take a copy of a hard drive, that's like a dead system. That's what we call it. So this could be things like analyzing the file system to pull passwords, logs, any hidden data like alternate data streams in NTFS. If you know that, I think we mentioned that. And then there was an NTFS research presentation. Go watch that on our ITSec YouTube. There's a bunch of ways to hide data on Windows systems. Same thing with on Linux, like SUID and SGID files. A lot of these, what we call IOCs that Malik talked about. There are separate IOCs for dead systems, not just live systems. So this is analyzing like malware file signatures. If we have a piece of malware that's an exe file, we take a hash of that. We call that, like we use that as an IOC, and we collect artifacts based upon that. If I find a file that matches that hash, it may not have the same name, but the data looks exactly the same. So we're going to use data incoming from the IR process to go into the digital forensics process. So we're collecting a bunch of this information. Let's say we need to figure out if someone's password was changed, whatever. A lot of that information can be ripped from a dead image. We also need to be able to prove that, you know, actual malicious commands ran or something of the sort. So we can use a handful of different tools. There's Amcache. There's a bunch of them listed. I'm not going to like list all these off, but I'll give you the highlights. Amcache is super cool. Looks at the Windows registry to look at recent run information for different executables and commands. And so it stores like information about all these executables that have been executed. The Windows registry is like a treasure trove if you have tools to look at it. Looking at it by hand is kind of impossible. Shimcache is the application compatibility cache. It's also a Windows registry. Basically, any file executed within a Windows create process call. I think we had an advanced Windows presentation. I don't know if we reviewed the create process call, but there's something called create process is how we actually like spin up an executable in Windows. So we can show that Windows actually interacted with this executable, stores like information on like how it was executed, what command line flags, etc. The Windows prefetch directory is super cool. Windows does like this fancy caching thing. Before you need something, it'll actually move it to a cache location on the Windows file system. Because ideally, when you're running Windows, the very optimal situation is that you have everything on a hard drive and then the operating system itself is on an SSD. So the idea is that the operating system is going to be on the fastest method of media on the system. So it's going to go ahead and cache that. But we can actually use that because the cache stays around for a while. We can actually use that to tell what ran recently. And a lot of, basically any resources you've accessed is going to run through this prefetch directory. We also can imply potential execution through things like shell bags. There was another RTSec research presentation. I'm not going to like rehash that. It was last year, I think, by Evan Mikulski. Super great. He used it from a little bit of a red team context, but contains super great information about shell bags. But it contains information about like access folders, like when you navigate through the Windows file system, you read and write data, shell bags store a bunch of information about that. So you can find a bunch of information. Let's say someone deleted sensitive files or deleted a file that contains evidence. You can use shell bags to find out. So there's a bunch of good tools. This is like heavily, I almost sneezed, sorry. This is heavily Windows specific, but there are a lot of Linux alternatives as well. But on Linux, you have a lot more of, I guess, native access to a lot of this information. So a normal standard Linux user is already going to be interacting with this information in the first place. With Windows, it's a little more hidden, so we like to highlight those tools. So let's talk about like the process that we go through in digital forensics. Now that we understand like the terminology and what we're talking about, let's talk about the procedure. So there's 4 main steps to this investigation process. First, collection and acquisition. So that is in the context of collecting dead disk images, memory captures, etc., as well as collection and acquisition of artifacts. But another big piece of this is preservation of evidence. So any artifacts that we do collect, we need to make sure that when we are collecting them, we're not actually modifying the dead disk image, we're not actually modifying the input data. So whether that means you have to like make a copy of it and work on a copy, that's perfectly fine if the process you are using requires destruction, but ideally we like to not touch anything. We remember when I talked about data integrity. It's a super big piece of this. You got to prove that what you're doing is actually the original evidence and that you're not making something up. So preservation of evidence, super big, especially if this is like in a court case and you're being an expert witness. For like the DA's office or something. This is super big. You have to show that you properly preserved all of the evidence in the case. Analysis, so we've collected all our artifacts, anything that could be potentially suspicious. Now we got to actually figure out what that means. So this is going through all those artifacts, whether it's their internet browser history or their prefetch files or their emails in Outlook. Like this is overviewing all the information for like what you can actually ascertain from that. Not just, oh, they have emails. No, let's like look at what those emails are. What do they contain? They were like talking about drug deals via email, like unencrypted email. So, we have to like look into all of this. And then the most important part, arguably, is the reporting and presenting, because just because you know what all this means doesn't know that the people you need to talk to about it do. More than likely, the people who are going to read this report when you are done are not going to know anything technical. They have no idea. So you need to provide both a technical explanation of what you're doing and what you did, as well as be able to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but you need to be able to explain in layman's terms what this means and why it matters. So if we notice that there's a strong correlation in this computer reaching out to like an Amazon S3 bucket that we know has malware on it because we checked. And you see that it reaches out at regular intervals, every 15 minutes for an entire week after we saw a suspicious login event. And after that suspicious login event, this activity started. We're going to be able to reasonably ascertain that someone installed malware on that system and it's making callbacks. So I just used a bunch of verbiage that people out of this room probably aren't going to understand. We need to like actually explain it. So that's super, super big part of the process. So collection, we need to follow a few different procedures here. More than likely, when you're working as a digital forensics like intern or entry-level employee, before you kind of like get to know the process, there are going to be policies and procedures that you have to follow. So of course, this is a very generic description of the process, when if you work in digital forensics, you're probably going to have to follow other procedures that may or may not coincide with this, but I guarantee you there is a good reason. So if the data if the system you're collecting data from is still alive, you're going to want to unplug the network and make sure that it's on an isolated LAN segment. That way, we think we're connected to the network, but we're not really. We're not going to be able to reach out to the internet. We're not going to be able to do anything like that. First step is we need to acquire volatile data. Does anyone in here know what I mean when I say volatile data? Correct. So RAM, when the RAM, which is erased when the system powers off. This is completely 100% correct. Anything that the data is temporary on, volatile is what we call it. That's the terminology we use. So things like RAM, Maybe you have cache drives. So I know a lot of systems use SSDs in front of hard drives that will slowly dump their data to the hard drives. You need to acquire anything that is volatile, anything that is not guaranteed to be non-volatile, or more commonly called persistent storage. So this is your RAM. Use different tools to collect information, collect images of your RAM. So this is things like Lime. What's the Windows version of it? Can't remember, but Lime is actually developed by Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken. Lime is a Linux tool. It's a Linux kernel module that you can insert, and it will actually dump an image of your RAM. There is a Windows alternative that I cannot remember for the life of me, but it may be integrated into FTK. We'll get into tools in a little bit, but there are tools out there to capture this memory. That's your first step. That's what you need to do before you power off the machine. So I know it's like a big thing in the incident response process. Malik had mentioned, it's probably a good idea to isolate this machine, but that does not mean that as soon as something happens, you unplug every cable. I know it's like a really big instinct to do that, but if we do that, we may actually lose some data. Another thing is that volatile data actually does stick around for a little bit. There was a research paper done on this, and I can't remember the exact specs, but essentially what they were doing was storing an image in RAM, and they they powered off the system, and then they did a memory capture. They powered it back on and did a memory capture at intervals to see how much the data decayed up until I think about 5 minutes. And I think beyond 5 minutes, the image was irrecoverable. But up until about 5 minutes, I think about approximately 50% of the image itself was recoverable. You could actually tell what it was. They did like a little Mona Lisa thing. And like 50%, I could definitely tell what it was. So just because you power off your system doesn't mean your RAM is gone, but best case scenario, you always want it. Acquire an image of your hard drive, whether this be via a hardware copier. So they actually have devices where you take a hard drive out of system, plug it in, and it can clone the hard drive, and it has what's called a hardware write blocker in it. This goes back to data integrity. We want to make sure that when we're copying a hard drive, we're not actually writing data to it. We are only reading. So there are hardware write blockers for that. That way, you physically cannot do it. As well as there's software. If you're running on a live system, things like FTK Imgur will have a software write blocker inside of them, so that way you can't write data. But yeah, I've went over this a little bit before. This is used to gather all the information, and this is the biggest piece of it. If we have garbage information, garbage in, garbage out, we really need to be sure that we're collecting high quality data to come in. Otherwise, when we analyze it, it's really not going to make sense, and we're going to be very frustrated. So with the preservation piece, as I was talking about, you need to make sure that none of this is tampered with. So there's a big thing called a chain of custody. Does anyone here know chain of custody already? Raise your hand if you'd like to offer something up. Kyle, what's up? You got a definition for me? It's okay. I guess. I was just saying in your own words. Yeah, that's a great way to put it simply. Every step of the way, recording where it was, who had it, and as much information about the evidence throughout the process as possible. That's super great. Obviously, the exact definition is here, but we really want to make sure that we have records that we can refer to. So if someone says, "Hey, you tampered with that data," I can go back and I say, "I didn't tamper with it. I didn't even have it in my custody. I didn't have a copy of it until this date at this time on this machine." It needs to be that specific, especially when you're presenting in court. You need to be able to pull these details back and go back to hard evidence. So yeah, date, time of evidence collection, who has access to it, locations of where and when you collected this evidence, physical descriptions of it. Oh, this hard drive, the sticker was untampered with, etc. Take pictures of any physical stuff you're collecting. All of that needs to go into your chain of custody report, and you need to maintain this throughout the investigation until until perpetuity, until you until the evidence leaves your chain of custody, or it leaves your custody. Even after the court case, a lot of times you have to maintain this evidence over time. You have to verify that this evidence has not been tampered. So previously I was talking about hashing when we hash those kinds of files. In digital forensics, the common practice is to use 2 types of hashes. Because as we know, if you've taken 140 or I think CSEC 140 or anything above, especially if you've taken cryptography, hashing algorithms have what we call collisions, where 2 separate pieces of data can actually result in the same hash. Now, with newer hashing algorithms like AES or sorry, not AES, SHA-256, 512, et cetera, we don't have to really worry about that. Because we've never ever had evidence of a collision because the key space is so big. But they're really hard to compute because they're more secure. So instead, what we can do is we can actually just use 2 types of hashes, MD5 and SHA-1, which, yes, they do have collisions, but if you use them both in combination, there is no evidence that using both has a collision. So we use this for data integrity checking. MD5 SHA-1 is super lightweight to compute. You can compute this super quick on a Raspberry Pi. Like it does not require a lot of power to generate these hashes. We also need to record any and all timestamps, timelines for data collection, and any like evidence that was pulled. We need an exact timestamp of when this image was taken. Because if you take the image after someone had tampered with it, you're going to think, oh, this was never tampered with, but the data was originally in there. So now you have to take all of this and you have to analyze it. So you need to figure out what data may have been deleted, may have been accessed. Was there any privilege escalation? So are we looking at things that a normal user shouldn't be able to do? You need to analyze all the files, all the entire file system. There are a lot of tools that will automatically do this for you. What Malik said in previous about the logging capabilities, you need to be able to know what your baseline looks like. So when you're getting into digital forensics, a super good thing to do is know what a baseline Windows system looks like. Know what a baseline Linux system looks like. You need to be able to compare to a standard running system. And a lot of times if you're doing this at a company, you'll have a specific image, not just fresh Windows. You'll have additional stuff installed. So you'll need to have a fresh copy of whatever your baseline is. That way you can compare it against. That's why I say baseline and not standard OS. So you need to analyze the entire file system, figure out what's different about this computer from our baseline. We need to construct a timeline and examine what's called the MAC times. Does anyone know what MAC times are? Not MAC address, MAC times. What's in the back? Perfect. The modification, access, and change times. So there's the file timestamps you see in Windows Explorer. You see create. You can sort by created at or modified at. That's all this. It's stored in metadata. So maybe if someone tampered with these, you can see an abnormality in that. You need to look for artifacts in all the data that you collected. This could be using keyword searching. Maybe you're searching, or like I said previously, maybe you're searching for a hash of a known piece of malware that you suspect to be in your environment. You could be searching by file hash. There's a lot of different ways using the tools we're going to mention in a little bit to go through this and analyze anything that's out of the ordinary, that doesn't look to be normal user operation. So like I said, the biggest piece of this is reporting. So the purpose of this entire process in the first place is to report legally admissible evidence in the court of law. Obviously, if you're doing this for a private company, a lot of this process may be glossed over, but you really want to be sure that when you're doing digital forensics in any capacity, you want to follow the highest of standards. Highest of standards being if it's admissible in court, you're probably following the proper procedure. So you got to make sure all your steps are included in your report, so that chain of custody, what devices you use to collect your evidence, all the methods you use to analyze them, the tools involved, etc. You are going to have to make a determination. Really, people are going to ask you questions about this report in general, about this case. And you're going to have to be able to make a clear determination and use facts and data to back that up. You're going to say, yes, I do believe someone made a remote login to our system, installed a backdoor, and it's been making callbacks for approximately a week. I can show you in the report on this page. We can see a timeline of that consistent callback functionality right after someone made a remote login to this account for someone who doesn't work remotely. So you can use those facts and data to back up your reasoning, but it's super important that you do have facts and data to back up your reasoning, because in the court of law, you're really going to need to be able to prove it, not just because you say so. Although there are some liberties as an expert witness where you may be asked your opinion. So you need to include all of the details of your analysis, so output from all the tools that you run. This report is probably going to be hundreds of pages if it's a decent-sized case. You know, but it is also important to filter out like all the noise. So anything that's like, oh, this user logged in at 8 a.m. for work every day, you know, we don't need to include every login for the 10 years they've worked here. So, you know, you do have to filter out a little bit of the noise. But all of your statements and conclusions that you talk about in a report should be accurate, and they should protect you as an investigator. So using phrases like, it is my professional opinion that, and so on. You know, you have to be able to preface your statements to be able to protect you, so that people can't say that you're saying this 100% for a fact. Because as a professional, we are allowed to be wrong. We are human. It's okay. It happens. But you need to say things like, it is my professional opinion. The evidence indicates, it's not you speaking, it's the evidence, or based on my knowledge. Obviously, you don't know everything. So based on your knowledge, you know, this is what you can ascertain. So like I promised, we're going to talk a little bit about some tools, high level. So this is something that both Malik and I actually learned about, and we put it in here. We highly recommend taking Yin's class, CSEC 464 or 730. Actually, we just learned that 730 will actually be taught by Stackpole in the fall, I do believe, Bill Stackpole. So highly recommend taking this course. If you guys aren't at RIT on the stream, highly recommend looking at these tools individually. Hopefully you can use this as a little bit of a guide. But these courses are fantastic. So some of the tools that we got to use in this course, Autopsy, this is a completely free tool, right? Yeah, this is a completely free tool. Is it open source?
I think it's open source. I have a command line.
Yeah, I think it's open source as well. But yeah, so Autopsy, super great tool. They have, I think, both a slightly older like Linux version, but I believe the Windows version is the most up to date. Super great tool to use. It's pretty much the free like digital forensics toolkit known out there. Just because it's free doesn't mean it's bad. I think there are a lot of times when you're working somewhere for digital forensics, they'll have these fancy paid tools, but just because something's free doesn't mean it's bad. So definitely practice with all of these tools. And there may be someone who actually uses Autopsy. But some of like the industry standards are both FTK and NCase. So these are paid tools, except for you can see FTK Imager is free. But that's actually the tool that collects the dead disk images. So FTK and NCase are both paid softwares. If you take this class, you will actually get access to those, and you'll be able to play around with those, so you'll get some insight into the industry itself. But these tools are very complex, very in-depth, and the only way to learn about them is to actually use them. So whether you're taking the course or you're doing this on your own, I highly encourage trying to get hands-on with these tools. SIFT, if you're a student, this is a virtual machine that's been provided, and you can just log in with your student email. You get access to this, and it includes a whole set of tools pre-installed on a Ubuntu VM. Think of like if you guys have ever heard of the Flare VM for like malware analysis. This is the digital forensics version of that. Yeah, kind of like Kali. I know there's also Kali Purple now. Kali Purple just got released. I haven't actually gotten a chance to look at that, but if you guys want to, definitely look into it. Definitely come up and do a research presentation about it, because I want to learn. Kali Purple became the blue team version of Kali, sort of. It's a little bit of a mix. It's a purple team one. Volatility is something used for memory analysis. So when we were talking about capturing that RAM, this is how you're going to analyze it. The newer version, Volatility 3, has tons of plugins for analyzing, running processes, open sessions, open logins, etc. There's tons of stuff. all of these tools are super in depth. Oh, also Velociraptor is on there. We didn't put that in the list, but that's okay. Velociraptor is super cool. Malik and I actually did, and Max and Ishan and Oh yeah, so we're gonna do a research presentation eventually. We haven't gotten around to it, but it's okay. I don't know if Malik will be here to be able to present, but it's okay. Maybe next week. We actually used Velociraptor for our CSEC 730 project to do dead disk forensic analysis automatically. So we developed a tool where you could log into a web UI, you would upload a file. It would then take that file, mount it to a Docker image to have all the data contained, and we could actually perform forensic analysis automatically and generate these reports in a LaTeX format automatically. So keep your eye out. Maybe we'll do a research presentation on that next week. Well, yeah, highly recommend taking this course. Malik and I could definitely tell you more. Max also took the course. Kat is in 464. Kenny's in 464. If you're interested in any of this, talk to any one of us.
Yeah, just a quick note on that tools section of things. As Brad mentioned, some of the tools are used like for memory analysis, for some of the dead disk analysis, and so forth. And one thing that I want to mention is some of the tools are used for like a data acquisition, and some of them are used for analysis specifically. For example, like Autopsy, it only can be used to analyze a disk or like a memory. I'm not sure if it can do a memory, actually. I have never used it for that. But you can use to analyze a disk, but you cannot use it to capture an image. On the other side, FTK or like Encase, I think Encase can do a disk image, right? Yeah. FTK, for sure, I know that because it's free, I use it. Encase, I'm not really entirely sure. I used it once for the class, and that was it. You can do disk images, and you can analyze those as well to some extent, not like fully. Volatility, you cannot take a disk image or like a memory image using that. You can only do analysis using it. Velociraptor, same as well. You can do live system analysis, or you can do dead disk analysis, but you cannot do capturing an image. Swift is just a toolbox that has all of those fancy tools installed and pre-configured for you just to go and play with. And OSQuery, yeah, OSQuery just create your system as a relational database, and you query that with semi-SQL syntax, and you just get information. So I can just like, okay, give me a list of all open ports. You just give it as a query syntax, and it will give you all open ports in a nice formatted table. So you can do analysis on that. You can just create a playbook that will give you an information of what the system has been doing and what's like the resources on the system, and you just can actually fasten your like analysis process for that.
Yeah, tools like Velociraptor and OSQuery actually really do bridge the gap between IR and digital forensics, because you can use them for some form of, I guess, logging. More like when you receive something in your SIM and you need to poke around. OSQuery and Velociraptor are those kinds of tools that you'll turn to actually like go poke around. But yeah, so we have one more thing, and that's, what kind of challenges would you face as a digital forensics engineer? And a big one of those is anti-digital forensics. Yeah, I know I could just put anti in front of like any word, and yeah, that's your biggest challenge. Red teaming, what's your biggest challenge? Anti-red teaming. We call that blue teaming. But so I promise it's a real thing. And real threat actors, and once you get into like the really serious realm, they act on behalf of sometimes like really big entities. I don't want to say necessarily like nation states, but it can get that serious. And so they really know what they're doing, and they know that there is going to be a digital forensics engineer that's going to take a look at this. So they can actually do things to make your life way harder. So they can install things that are intended to manipulate, erase, or obfuscate digital data. So maybe they take an unencrypted system and they encrypt it. Well, good luck getting a dead disk image of that now. So you have to do like things like live acquisition on that. So they do things to make your life way, way harder. They also make it really time consuming. So it is possible, but it takes a real long time. And when you have deadlines to meet, especially with like court cases and stuff, this is not something that you can just take forever on. They can also make it virtually impossible. Essentially, if they have like a laptop that someone was using, and then right before it gets taken into evidence, someone BitLockers the system and shuts it off. For anybody you don't know, BitLocker is built in like Windows hard drive encryption. So once it's encrypted, good luck getting it unencrypted. There's a lot of softwares that people write themselves to encrypt their hard drives if they really, really don't want you to know about this. Like it can become virtually impossible to do digital forensics on a system because of anti-digital forensics. With that, if you find yourself in a situation where you have the ability to do any of these actions, please abide by the RETSec Code of Conduct and the RETSec ethics policy. We really do believe that we want to do good with our information here. So I'm telling you all of this, hoping that you won't take it and go do something malicious. Hopefully you will end up on the digital forensics side of this, having to deal with this instead of making someone else's life harder. If you do end up in a situation where you've done something, maybe by accident, as is totally possible, please don't do things like overwriting or wiping data. Please don't hide any evidence or obfuscate data. That makes the digital forensics process way harder, way more time consuming. Ideally, this doesn't happen in general, but people get scared, people do things, and you have to be able to be prepared to know the signs of it. When someone did something but tried to delete it, the only way you can really know this is just to get your hands on, get experimenting with it. Like I said, know your baselines, know the IOCs that Malik talked about, know where to look. You can do a lot of that in the forensics course, but courses only go so far. So you need to get hands-on, get working with it. And why is this not advancing? Well, yeah, that's a high-level overview. Malik and I can't, in an hour, give you an in-depth, explanation of everything, because it's a very broad part of the industry. But does anyone have any, last questions or comments before we close out? Malik has a comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Big shout out to Kat. She worked a lot on this presentation, but unfortunately she was not able to come today. But 80 to 70% of the slides you just saw was all done by her. So thank you, Kat.
That's true. Thank you guys so much. All right, so I think we have demo time now. Yeah. Is there demos? Where's Alex? I don't know. Yeah, either Alex. All right, so all I know is that it's time to put back on the music. We're going to say goodbye to the stream temporarily, and we're going to take a break. And we will be back at approximately 2 p.m. for security news.
Everybody give them a round of applause, please, because that was a very good presentation. Excuse me.